guys, it's Emma, and I'm back today for you with another video. It's the month of December, and this month is normally about the time when booktubers start doing their yearly wrap-up videos, and this year I'm going to try to start doing those annually, hopefully. You never know. This video is going to be the second out of the 3 wrap-up videos that I'm going to do. The first one was my worst books of 2020. I'll link that up here. You can go check that out. And today we're going to be talking about, in the second installment of the wrap-up, we are going to be talking about the books that I DNFed this year. And if you're not familiar with the term DNF, that means I just didn't finish, all right? I did not finish the book. This year, I didn't finish 9 books. Most of these are either audio or ebooks, so they were a little harder to dictate where I stopped. Basically, I've got some new qualifications, I guess you could call them, for DNFing and rating said DNFed book. Those 2 qualifications are that I have to reach at least page 100 for me to DNF the book, and that I have to reach at least a quarter of the way through in order for me to rate the book, or else I feel like it's just not very fair. I didn't solidify those rules for me personally, not just for, reviewing them, but just me personally for reading them. I didn't solidify those rules until very late in the year. So these books, you can tell that I was waiting to get to page 100 to at least get rid of it, So, without any further ado, let's get into the 9 books. So the first book that I DNF'd was Black Wings Beating by Alex London. This was an audiobook that I read, and I stopped at around 27%, so I gave it 2 stars. It wasn't bad. It didn't hook me, I felt like I was reading it solely for the purpose of waiting for when it was going to get better. I had heard people talk about it being like, oh yeah, it's going to be Falconers mixed with Pokemon battles. And I was like, okay, word, you sold me, right? It was kind of underwhelming, if I'm going to be completely honest. The main character's brother was a twit. I was also really turned off just by the writing style. It was very choppy. And not choppy as in Stephen Graham Jones writing choppy. No, choppy as in bad choppy, So Black Wings Beating, I didn't finish just because the writing kind of swayed me a little bit, and then it just didn't hook me. The next one that we're going to talk about is one whose adaptation is one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is Warm Bodies by Isaac Marion. Listen, if you haven't watched Warm Bodies, you should. It's really good. I gave it 2 stars, and I stopped at around page 202, I believe. This was an ebook. In my opinion, the movie did it better. The movie cut out a lot of, I want to say, unnecessary stuff. There was just a lot of stuff in the book that didn't really make sense that I feel like, again, the movie did a lot better. For example, the zombies in the book have church. They also have school, and they also have marriages. So Warm Bodies was okay, but the movie is superior. I'm sorry. The third book that I want to talk about that I DNF'd is M for Magic by Neil Gaiman. Now, this, I didn't give it a rating because I stopped at around 14%, which was page 38, I believe. With this book and another book that we're going to be talking about later in the video, I've realized that anthologies just really don't do it for me. They're a little too short in order for me to connect with the characters. The only anthology that I've really liked was Geektastic by Holly Black. That anthology, I love it, but M for Magic just didn't hit with me very well. Next, we've got Stardust, also by Neil Gaiman. This was when I was starting to think, okay, Neil Gaiman just may not be for me, because I've already read Good Omens, and it was okay. The ending was subpar. M for Magic might have just been my fault. Anthologies are not my thing. I didn't rate Stardust, again, because just like M for Magic, I didn't get to 25%, or at least I got to 22%, which was about page 55. This was also an ebook. The movie Stardust, along with Warm Bodies, is one of my favorite movies of all time. I grew up watching Stardust. Stardust is a spectacular movie, and in my opinion, it is much better than the book. Because unlike the book, it's not confusing. The book felt to me as if it was all over the place. The fifth book that we're going to talk about today is the first book on this whole list that I actually have physically, and that is Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this 2 stars. I stopped it around 57%, which was, I believe, around page 212. What I've realized is that I don't really like superhero stories unless they're dark. For example, The Boys or Watchmen, where superheroes aren't necessarily the greatest people in the world. Another thing that I feel like I should mention is that this book, unfortunately, was a victim of one of my worst reading slumps of the year. And it didn't get me out of my slump. In fact, it kind of got me deeper into my slump. I didn't particularly like the writing style, and the dialogue for me was a little cheesy. For example, the banter. This book is a book that I talk about in my worst books of 2020. I DNFed this book, as you can tell. And that is Artemis by Andy Weir. I gave this bitch 1 star, okay? I stopped it around 28%, which was about page 102. This is the same dude that wrote The Martian, I believe 3 or 4 years earlier. I don't know how that occurred. I just want to know the thinking process. I want to know how he got from The Martian to this. This doesn't add up. The writing was incredibly annoying and just really obnoxious at times, because for some reason, whenever it's through the point of view of a teenager, they always cuss after every like 4 words. It's just so funny how grown-ups think teenagers talk most of the time. It was kind of problematic. Like, for example, there's the quote that unfortunately lives rent-free in my mind, which of course I really wish that I could in fact charge it rent, because it is, "He was as blonde as a Hitler wet dream." On top of that, we've also got a quote in here that says, in the narrator's monologue, "I giggled like a little girl, but it's okay, I am a girl." Okay. The next book that we're going to be talking about is the other anthology that I read this year, which is Monsterous Affections by Kelly Link and Gavin G. Grant. Like I said with MS for Magic, this was the book that solidified the fact that maybe just anthologies just aren't for me. Even though I liked this one better, after all, I stopped at like 48%, and it was an audiobook, so I don't really have the page number for it, but I gave this one 2 stars because while it was entertaining at some points, it just didn't keep me going. Like, I found myself skipping stories. I don't blame Monsterous Affections or MS for Magic for anything, obviously, because it's my fault. My indecisive ass just couldn't tell whether or not I liked anthologies. I know now. The next book that we are going to talk about is The Voyage of Argo by Apollonius of Rhodes. I also had this in my worst books of 2020. I gave this bitch 1 star as well. And I stopped at around 44%, so about literally page 100. I couldn't wait to put this bitch down. Like I said in my worst books of 2020 video, it was a good story. I liked the pre-Iliad vibe, but I despised Jason. He was the most dramatic, everybody center your attention on me because my tragedy is the worst tragedy in the world. A lot of The Voyage of Argo I had to look up, which maybe because I just didn't get to the end. And if that is so, that is my fault. Maybe it's because of the edition I had, and if that is so, that is also my fault. However, I got pretty sick of having to look up key fragments of the story because we didn't know what the Golden Fleece was, we didn't know where it was, we didn't know how it got to where it was, we didn't even know that Jason was after the Golden Fleece. So that, on top of having to deal with Jason, was unbearable to me. And it shows by the fact that I literally stopped at my cutoff. The last book, the 9th book that we're going to talk about today, is honestly a disappointment because I had really high hopes for this. And that is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. I didn't rate this. because I stopped at around 16%, which I believe is about page 104. The wordiness was just out of control. The editing part of my brain was working overdrive, all right? She was just being so frazzled and so glitched out because I would just be looking and detecting what words could just be cut out, what paragraphs could be cut out. The action sequences, I will give it, were really good, but there would be about maybe 35 to 45 pages of unnecessary wordiness to build up to an action sequence that would barely even last 2 pages. So it honestly wasn't even worth it. It kind of gave me a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of vibe because it was like a mystery, and I was let down. So you guys, that was my list of books that I DNF'd this year. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope that you will tune in to the last installment of this 2020 wrap-up, which will be my best books of 2020, because I feel like we should end it off with a positive note, right? I mean, 2020 was already negative enough. With that being said, I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope you guys have a happy new year, and I hope you guys have a happy holidays. And to top it all off, I hope you have a good rest of your day as well. Bye!